36 months, 36,000 miles. Limited warranty on all new models, a lesser poster proclaims. And another, all new Cressidas, powerful new 3.0-liter engine, 190 horsepower, 4-speed electronically controlled overdrive transmission, new safety shift lock. Nelson isn't in, to Harry's considerable relief. The day is a desultory Tuesday, and the two salesmen on the floor are both young men he doesn't know, and who don't know him. Changes have been made since last November. Nelson has had the office area repainted in brighter colors, pinks and greens like a Chinese tea house, and has taken down the old blown-up photos of Harry in his glory days as a basketball star, with the headlines calling him Rabbit. Mr. Angstrom left for lunch around 1 o'clock and said he might not be back this afternoon, a pudgy salesman tells him. Jake and Rudy used to have their desks out in the open along the wall, in the direction of the disco club that failed and, when the 70s went out, became an appliance rental center. One of Nelson's bright ideas was to take these desks away and line the opposite wall with cubicles, like booths in a restaurant. Maybe it creates more salesman-customer intimacy at the ticklish moment of signing the forms, but the arrangement seems remote from general business operations and exposed to the noise of the service garage. In this direction, and behind toward the river and brewer, lies the scruffy, unpaved area of the lot Harry has always thought of in fantasy as Paraguay, which in reality just got rid of its old dictator with the German name, Harry read in the papers recently. Yeah, well, he tells this fat stranger, I'm a Mr. Angstrom, too. Who is here? Who knows anything? He doesn't mean to sound rude, but Thelma's revelation has upset him. He can feel his heart racing and his stomach struggling to digest the 2 bowls of nuts. Another young salesman, a thinner one, comes toward them, out of a booth at the Paraguay end, and he sees it's not a man. Her hair being pulled back tight from her ears and her wearing a tan trench coat to go out onto the lot to a customer fooled him. It's a female car salesman, like in that Toyota commercial, only white. He tries to control his face so his chauvinism doesn't show. I'm Elvira Ohlenbach, Mr. Angstrom, she says, and gives him a narrow, hard hand that, after Thelma's pasty cold touch a half-hour ago, feels hot. I'd know you were Nelson's dad even without the pictures he keeps on his wall. You look just like him, especially around the mouth. Is this chick kidding him? She is a thin, taut young woman, over-exercised the way so many of them are now, with deep, bony eye sockets and a deep, no-curves voice and thin lips painted a pale, luminous pink like reflecting tape, and a neck so slender it makes her jaws look wide, coming to points under the lobes of her exposed white ears, which stick out. She wears gold earrings shaped like snail shells. He says to her, I guess you've come onto the job since I was last here. Just since January, she says. But before that I was 3 years with Johnson out on Route 819. How do you like it, selling cars? I like it very much, Elvira Ohlenbach says, and no more. She doesn't smile much, and her eyes are a little insistent. He puts himself on the line, telling her, You don't think of it usually as a woman's game. She shows a little life. I know, isn't that strange when it's really such a natural? The women who come in don't feel so intimidated, and the men aren't so afraid to show their ignorance as they would be with another man. I love it. My dad loved cars, and I guess I take after him. It all makes sense, he admits. I don't know why it's been so long in coming. Women sales reps, I mean. How's business been? It's been a good spring so far. People love the Camry, and of course the Corolla plugs right along, but we've had surprisingly good luck with the luxury models compared to what we hear from other dealers. Brewer's economy is looking up after all these years. The dead industries have been shaken out, and the new ones, the little specialty and high-tech plants, have been coming in, and of course the factory outlets have had a fabulous reception. They're the key to the whole revival. Super. How about the used end of it? That been slow? Her deeply set eyes, shadowy like Nelson's but not sullen and hurt, glance up in some puzzlement. Why, no, not at all. One of the reasons Nelson had for hiring a new rep was he wanted to devote more of his own attention to the used cars and not wholesale so many of them out. There was a man who used to do it with a Greek name. Stavros, Charlie Stavros. Exactly. And ever since he retired, Nelson feels the used cars have been on automatic pilot. Nelson's philosophy is that unless you cater to the lower-income young or minority buyer with a buy they can manage, you've lost a potential customer for a new upscale model 5 or 10 years down the road. Sounds right. She seems awfully full of Nelson, this girl. Girl. She may be 30 or more for all he can tell. Everybody under 40 looks like a kid to him. The pudgy salesman, the one who's a man, a nice familiar Italian type, Brewer is still producing a few, with husky voices, hairy wrists, and with old-fashioned haircuts close above the ears, feels obliged to put his 2 cents in. Nelson's really been making the used cars jump. Ads in the Standard, prices in shaving cream on the windshield knocked lower every 2 or 3 days, discounts for cash. Some people swing by every day to see what's up for grabs. He has an anxious way of standing too close and hurrying his words. His cheeks could use a shave and his breath a cert or two. Garlic, they use it on everything. Discounts for cash, huh? Harry says. Where is Nelson, anyway? He told us he needed to unwind, Elvira says. He wanted to get away from the calls. Calls? Some man keeps calling him, Elvira says. Her voice drops. He sounds kind of foreign. Harry is getting the impression she isn't as smart as she seemed at first impression. Her insistent eyes catch a hint of this thought, for she self-protectively adds, I probably shouldn't be saying a thing, but seeing as you're his father... Sounds like a dissatisfied customer, Rabbit says, to help her out of it. Toyota doesn't get many of those, the other salesman crowds in. Year after year they put out the lowest maintenance machines on the road with a repair-free longevity that's absolutely unbelievable. Don't sell me, I'm sold, Harry tells him. I get enthusiastic. My name's Benny Leone, by the way, Mr. Angstrom. Benny for Benedict. A pleasure to see you over here. The way Nelson tells us, you've washed your hands of the car business and glad of it. I'm semi-retired. Do they know, he wonders, that Janice legally owns it all? He supposes they pretty much have the picture. Most people do in life. People know more than they let on. Benny says, you get all kinds of kooky calls in this business. Nelson shouldn't let it bug him. Nelson takes everything too seriously, Elvira adds. I tell him don't let things get to you, but he can't help it. He's one of those guys so uptight he squeaks. He was always a very caring boy, Harry tells them. Who else is here besides you two? Talk about automatic pilot. There's Jeremy, Lenny says, who comes in generally Wednesdays through Saturdays. And Lyle's here, Elvira says, and glances sideways to where a couple in bleached jeans are wandering in the glinting sea of Toyotas. I thought Lyle was sick, Harry says. He says he's in remission, Benny says, his face getting a careful look, as maybe Harry's did when he was trying not to appear a chauvinist in Elvira's eyes. She, for her part, has suddenly moved, in her spring trench coat, toward the bright outdoors, where a pair of potential buyers browse. Glad to hear it, Harry says, feeling less constrained and ceremonious talking to Benny alone. I didn't think there was any remission from his disease. Not in the long run. The man's voice has gone huskier, a touch gangsterish, as if the woman's presence had constrained him too. Harry jerks his head curtly toward the outdoors. How's she doing, really? Benny moves an inch even closer and confides, she gets him to a certain point, then gets rigid and lets the deal slip away, like she's afraid the rest of us will say she's too soft. Harry nods. Like women are always the stingiest tippers. Money spooks 'em. Still, he says, loyal to the changing times and his son's innovations, I think it's a good idea. Like lady ministers. They have a people touch. Yeah, the jowly small man cautiously allows. Gives the place a little zing, a little something different. Where is Lyle, did you say? He wonders how much these two are concealing from him, protecting Nelson. He was aware of eye signals between them as they talked. A maze of secrets, this agency he built up in his own image since 1975, when Old Man Springer suddenly popped one summer day like an overheated thermometer. A lot of hidden stress in the auto business. Chancy, yet you're stuck with all that inventory. He was in Nelson's office 10 minutes ago. Doesn't he use Mildred's? Harry explains. Mildred Croust was the bookkeeper for years here when you were just a kid. In terms of Springer Motors, he has become a historian. He can remember when that appliance rental place up the road had a big sign saying Disco, remade from a Mr. Peanut in spats and top hat, brandishing his stick in neon. But Benny seems to know all he wants to. He says, That's a kind of conference room now. There's a couch in there if anybody needs all of a sudden to take a nap. Lyle used to, but now he works mostly at home, what with his illness. How long has he had it? Benny gets that careful look again and says, At least a year. That HIV virus can be inside you for 5 or 10 before you know it. His voice goes huskier. He comes closer still. A couple of the mechanics quit when Nelson brought him in as an accountant in his condition, but you gotta hand it to Nelson. He told them go ahead, quit if they wanted to be superstitious. He spelled out how you can't get it from casual contact and told them take it or leave it. How'd Manny go for that? Manny? Oh, yeah, Mr. Manning in service. As I understand it, that was the reason he left finally. He'd been shopping, I hear, at other agencies, but at his age it's hard to make a jump. You said it, Harry says. Hey, looks like another customer out there. You better help Elvira out. Let 'em look is my motto. If they're serious, they'll come in. Elvira tries too hard. Rabbit walks across the display floor, past the performance board and the parts window and the crash-barred door that leads into the garage, to the green doorway, set in old random-grooved masonite, now painted a dusty rose, of what used to be his office. Elvira was right. The photographic blow-ups of his basketball headlines and half-tone newspaper cuts haven't been tossed out, but are up on Nelson's walls, where the kid has to look at them every day. Also on the walls are the Kiwanis and Rotary plaques, and a citation from the Greater Brewer Chamber of Commerce, and a President's Touch Award that Toyota gave the agency a few years ago, and a Playboy calendar, the girl for this month dressed up as a bare-assed Easter bunny, which Harry isn't so sure strikes quite the right note, but at least says the whole agency hasn't gone queer. Lyle stands up at Nelson's desk before Harry is in the room. He is very thin. He wears a thick red sweater under his gray suit. He extends a skeletal bluish hand and an unexpectedly broad smile, his teeth enormous in his shrunken face. "Hello, Mr. Angstrom. I bet you don't remember me." But he does look dimly familiar, like somebody you played basketball against 40 years ago. His skull is very narrow, that crew-cut hair so evenly blonde it looks dyed. The accountant's half-glasses on his nose are of thin gold wire. He is so pale, light seems to be coming through his skin. Squinting, Harry takes the offered hand in a brief shake and tries not to think of those little HIVs, intricate as tiny spaceships, slithering off onto his palm and up his wrist and arm into the sweat pores of his armpit and burrowing into his bloodstream there. He wipes his palm on the side of his jacket and hopes it looks like he's patting his pocket. Lyle tells him, "I used to work in fiscal alternatives on Weiser Street when you and your wife would come and trade gold and silver." Harry laughs, remembering. "We damn near broke our backs, lugging one load of silver dollars up the street to the fucking bank." "You were smart," Lyle says. "You got out in time. I was impressed." This last remark seems a touch impertinent, but Harry says amiably, "Dumb luck. That place still functioning?" "In a very restricted way," Lyle says, overemphasizing, for Harry's money, the very. "It seems if you're a fag, you have to exaggerate everything to bring it all up to normal pitch. The whole metals boom was a fad, really. They're very depressed now." "It was a nifty little place. That beauty who used to do the actual buying and selling, I could never figure out how she could run the computer with those long fingernails." "Oh, Marcia. She committed suicide." Rabbit is stunned. She had seemed so angelic in her way. "She did? Why?" "Oh, the usual personal problems," Lyle says, flicking them away with the back of his transparent hand. In Rabbit's eyes, globules of blurred light move around Lyle's margins like E.T. in the movie. Nothing to do with the metals slump. She was just the front. The money behind it came out of Philadelphia. As Lyle talks airily, Harry can hear his intakes of breath, a slight panting that goes with the bluish shadows at the temples, the sense of him having come from space and about to go back to space. This guy's even worse off than I am, Rabbit thinks, and likes him for it. He sees no signs of the Capaces spots, though, just a general radiant aura of a body resisting life, refusing sustenance, refusing to go along with its own system. There is a sweetish, rotten smell, like when you open the door of the unused refrigerator in a vacation place, or maybe Rabbit imagines it. Lyle suddenly, limply, sits down as if standing has been too much effort. Harry takes the chair across the desk where the customers usually sit, begging for easier terms. "Lyle," Harry begins, "I'd like to inspect the books. Bank statements, receipts, payments, loans, inventory, the works." "Why on earth, why?" Lyle's eyes, as the rest of his face wastes away, stand out, more in the round than healthy people's eyes. He sits erect, one fleshless forearm for support laid in its gray sleeve parallel to the edge of Nelson's desk. Either to conserve his energy or protect the truth, he has set himself to give minimal answers. "Oh, human curiosity. Frankly, there's something fishy about the statements I've been getting in Florida." Harry hesitates, but can't see that being specific would do any harm at this point. He still has the hope that everything can be explained away, that he can go back to not thinking about the lot. There aren't enough used car sales proportionally. There aren't? You could argue it's a variable, and with the good economy under Reagan, people can afford to buy new. But in my years here, there's always been a certain proportion. Things average out over the course of a couple months, and that hasn't been happening in the statements since November. In fact, it's been getting weirder. Weirder? Funnier? Phonier? Whatever. When can I see the books? I'm no accountant. I want Mildred Krause to go over them with me. Lyle makes an effort and shifts his arm off the desk and rests with both hands out of sight on his lap. Harry is reminded by the way he moves of the ghostly slowness of the languid dead floppy bodies at Buchenwald being moved around in the post-war newsreels. Naked, loose-jointed, their laps in plain view. Talk about obscene. Here was something so obscene they had to show it to us so we'd believe it. Lyle tells Harry, I keep a lot of the data at home in my computer. We have a computer system here, top of the line in IBM. I remember our installing it. Mine's compatible, a little apple that does everything. I bet it does. You know, frankly, just because you're sick and have to stay home a lot's no reason the Springer Motors accounts should be scattered all over Diamond County. I want them here. I want them here tomorrow. This is the first acknowledgment either has made that Lyle is sick, that Lyle is dying. The boy stiffens, and his lips puff out a little. He smiles that skeleton, generous grin. I can only show the books to authorized persons, he says. I'm authorized. Who could be more authorized than me? I used to run the place. That's my picture all over the walls. Lyle's eyelids, with lashes darker than his hair, lower over those bulging eyes. He blinks several times and tries to be delicate, to keep the courtesies between them. My understanding from Nelson is that his mother owns the company. Yeah, but I'm her husband. Half of what's hers is mine. In some circumstances, perhaps, and perhaps in some states. But not, I think, in Pennsylvania. If you wish to consult a lawyer... His breathing is becoming difficult. It is almost a mercy for Harry to interrupt. I don't need to consult any lawyer. All I need is to have my wife call you and tell you to show me the books. Me and Mildred. I want her in on this. Miss Krause, I believe, resides now in a nursing home, the Dengler home in Penn Park. Good. That's 5 minutes from my house. I'll pick her up and come back here tomorrow. Let's set a time. Lyle's lids lower again, and he awkwardly replaces his arm on the desk top. When and if I receive your wife's authorization and Nelson's go-ahead, you're not going to get that. Nelson's the problem here, not the solution. I say, even if, I would need some days to pull all the figures together. Why is that? The book should be up to date. What's going on here with you guys? Surprisingly, Lyle says nothing. Perhaps the struggle for breath is too much. It is all so wearying. Harry's heart is racing and his chest twinging, but he resists the impulse to pop another nitrostat. He doesn't want to become an addict. He slumps down lower in the customer's chair, as if negotiations for now have gone as far as they can go. He tries another topic. Tell me about it, Lyle. How does it feel? What feel? Being so close to, the barn. The reason I ask, I had a touch of heart trouble down in Florida and still can't get used to it, how close I came. I mean, most of the time it seems unreal. I'm me, and all around me everything is piddling along as normal. And then suddenly at night, when I wake up needing to take a leak, or in the middle of a TV show that's sillier than hell, it hits me, and wow, the bottom falls right out. I want to crawl back into my parents, but they're dead already. Lyle's puffy lips tremble, or seem to, as he puzzles out this new turn the conversation has taken. You come to terms with it, he says. Everybody dies. But some sooner than others, huh? A spasm of indignation animates Lyle. They're developing new drugs all the time, the French, the Chinese, trichosanthin, tybo derivatives. Eventually, the FDA will have to let them in, even if they are a bunch of Reaganite fascist homophobes who wouldn't mind seeing us all dead. It's a question of hanging on. I have hope. Well, great. More power to you. But medicine can only do so much. That's what I'm learning the hard way. You know, Lyle, it's not as though I'd never thought about death or never had people near to me die, but I never, you could say, had the actual taste of it in my mouth. I mean, it's not kidding. It wants it all. He wants that pill. He wonders if Nelson keeps a roll of lifesavers in the desk the way he himself used to. Just something to put in your mouth when you get nervous. Harry finds that every time he thinks of his death, it makes him want to eat. That's why he hasn't lost more weight. The other man's attempt to open him up has made Lyle more erect behind the desk, more hostile. He stares at Harry with those eroded around eyes, beneath eyebrows the same metallic blonde as his hair. One good thing about it, he offers, is you become harder to frighten. By minor things. By threats like yours, for example. I'm not making any threats, Lyle. I'm just trying to find out what the fuck is going on. I'm beginning to think this company is being ripped off. If I'm wrong and it's all on the up and up, you've nothing to be frightened of. Poor guy, he's biting the bullet and less than half Harry's age. At his age, what was Harry doing? Setting type the old-fashioned way and dreaming about ass. Ass, one way or another, does us in. Membranes too thin, those little HIVs sneak right through. Black box of nothingness is what it felt like with Thelma. Funny appetite for a steady diet. Being queer isn't all roses. Lyle moves his arms around again with that brittle caution. His body has become a collection of dead sticks. Don't make allegations, Mr. Angstrom, you wouldn't want to defend in court. Well, is it an allegation or a fact that you refuse to let me and an impartial accountant examine your books? Mildred's not impartial. She's furious at me for replacing her. She's furious because I and my computer can do in a few hours what took her all week. Mildred's an honest old soul. Mildred's senile. Mildred's not the point here. The point is you're defying me to protect my son. I'm not defying you, Mr. Angstrom. You can call me Harry. I'm not defying you, sir. I'm just telling you I can't accept orders from you. I have to get them from Nelson or Mrs. Angstrom. You'll get 'em. Sir. A smiling, provocative hovering in Lyle's expression goads him to ask, Do you doubt it? I'll be waiting to hear, Lyle says. Listen, you may know about a lot of things I don't, but you don't know shit about marriage. My wife will do what I tell her to. Ask her to. In a business like this, we're absolutely one. We'll see, Lyle says. My parents were married, as a matter of fact. I was raised in a marriage. I know a lot about marriage. Didn't do you much good. It showed me something to avoid, Lyle says, and smiles as broadly, as guilelessly as when Harry came in. And the old days at Fiscal Alternatives for a moment returned, the stacks of gold and silver, and flawless, cool Marcia with her long red nails. Poor beauty did herself in. She and Monroe. Rabbit admits to himself the peculiar charm queers have, a boyish lightness, a rising above all that female muck where life breeds. How's Slim? Harry asks, rising from the chair. Nelson used to talk a lot about Slim. Slim, Lyle says, too weak or rude to stand, died before Christmas. Sorry to hear it, Harry lies. He holds out his hand over the desk to be shaken, and the other man hesitates to take it, as if fearing contamination. Feverish, loose-jointed bones. Harry gives them a squeeze and says, Tell Nelson if you ever see him, I like the new decor. Kind of a boutique look. Cute. Goes with the new sales rep. You hang loose, Lyle. Hope China comes through for you. We'll be in touch. On the radio on the way home, he hears that Mike Schmidt, who exactly 2 years ago, on April 18th, 1987, slugged his 500th home run against the Pittsburgh Pirates in Three River Stadium, is closing in on Richie Ashburn's total of 2,217 hits to become the hittingest Philly ever. Rabbit remembers Ashburn, one of the whiz kids who beat the Dodgers for the pennant the fall Rabbit became a high school senior. Kurt Simmons, Del Ennis, Dick Sisler in center, Stan Lopata behind the plate. Beat the Dodgers the last game of the season, then lost to the Yankees 4 straight. In 1950, he was 17 and had led the County B League with 817 points his junior season. Remembering these statistics helps settle his agitated mood, stirred up by seeing Thelma and Lyle, a mood of stirred-up, unsatisfied desire at whose fringes licks the depressing idea that nothing matters very much, we'll all soon be dead. Janice's idea of a low-sodium diet for him is to get these frozen dinners in plastic pouches called low-cal. Most of this pre-cooked chicken and beef is full of chemicals, so it doesn't go bad on the shelf. To work it all through his system, he usually has a second beer. Janice is distracted these days, full of excitement about taking real estate courses at the Penn State Extension. I'm not sure I totally understand it, though the woman at the office over on Pine Street, hasn't that neighborhood gone downhill since you and your father used to work at Verity? She was very patient with my questions. The classes meet 3 hours a week for 10 weeks, and there are 2 required and 4 electives to get this certificate. But I don't think you need the certificate to take the licensing exam, which, for a salesperson, that's what I'd be, is given monthly, and for a broker, which maybe I'd try to be later, only quarterly. But the gist of it is I could begin with 2 this April, and then take 2 more from July to September, and if all goes well, get my license in September and start selling, strictly on a commission basis at first, for this firm that Doris Eberhardt's new brother-in-law is one of the partners in. She says she's told him about me, and he's interested. It's in your favor, evidently, to be middle-aged. The clients assume you're experienced. Honey, why do you need to do this? You have the lot. I don't have the lot. Nelson has the lot. Does he? I dropped over there today, and he wasn't there, just these kids he's hired. 1 fag, 1 wop, and a skirt. Harry, now who's sounding prejudiced? He doesn't push ahead with his story. He wants to save it for when they both can focus. After dinner, Janice likes to watch Jeopardy, even though she never knows any of the answers, and then the Phillies are playing the Mets on Channel 11. The little stone house with its fractional number on Franklin Drive draws darkling about them, just them. In the evening, as the gradual northern dusk, in Florida the sun just suddenly shuts down and the moon takes over, seeps into the still bare trees, quelling the bird-song, and a lemon tinge of sky in the west, beyond the craggy chimneys of the big clinker brick house, deepens to an incendiary orange, and then the crimson of last embers. Another few weeks the trees will leaf in, and there won't be any sunset to see from the lozenge-pane windows of his den, when he turns his eyes aside from watching the television screen. In the 3rd inning, with 2 men on, Schmidt hits a home run, his 4th of the young season, and the 546th of his career. It puts the Phils ahead 5-0, and Rabbit starts switching channels, finding no basketball playoffs, only Matlock and the Wonder Years. Much as Janice irritates him when she's with him, when she isn't in the room with him, or when he can't hear her knocking around in the kitchen or upstairs above his head, he grows uneasy. He switches off the set and goes looking for her, full of his troubling news as once he was full of gold, Krugerrands. She is already in one of her nighties upstairs, and those infuriating Florida sandals that go flop-flop as she walks around when he is still trying to sleep in the morning. Not that he can ever sleep late the way he did as a young man, or even in his 40s. He wakes around 6 with a little start, and ever since his heart attack there is a gnawing in his stomach whose cause he can't locate, until he realizes it is the terror of being trapped inside his perishing body, like being in a prison cell with a madman who might decide to kill him at any moment. She is paddling back and forth, flop-flop, carrying small stacks of folded cloth, laundry she has brought up the back stairs. One square stack he recognizes as folded handkerchiefs. Another, less trim, as his jockey shorts with their slowly slackening elastic waists. A third as her own underthings, which still excite him, not so much when they are on her as when empty and laundry clean. He doesn't know how to begin. He throws his big body across the bed diagonally and lets the nubbles of the bedspread rub his face. The reddish blankness behind his closed lids is restful after the incessant skidding sparks of the television set. "Harry, is anything the matter?" Janice's voice sounds alarmed. His fragility gives him a new hold over her. He rolls over and can't help smiling at the lumpy figure she cuts in her nightie. She looks not so different from how Judy looks in hers, and not very much larger. Her scant bangs don't quite hide her high forehead, its Florida tan dulling, and her tired eyes look focused elsewhere. He begins, "There's something going wrong over at the lot. When I was over there today, I asked to see the books, and this fag with AIDS Nelson has put in as bookkeeper instead of Mildred told me he couldn't show them to me unless you authorized it. You're the boss, according to him." The tip of her little tongue creeps out and presses on her upper lip. "That was silly," she says. "I thought so, but I kept my cool. Poor guy, he's just covering up for Nelson." "Covering up for Nelson? Why?" Well, Harry sighs heavily and arranges himself on the bed like an odalisque, with a hippie twist to his body. You really want to hear this? Of course. But she keeps moving around with her little stacks. I have a new theory. I think Nelson takes cocaine, and that's why he's so shifty and jumpy and kind of paranoid. Janice moves carefully to the bureau, flop and then flop, carrying what Harry recognizes as her salmon-colored running suit with the blue sleeves and stripes, which she never wears on the street around here, where the middle-aged are more careful about looking ridiculous. Who told you this? She asks. He squirms on the bed, pulling up his legs and pushing off his shoes so as not to dirty the bedspread of white dotted Swiss. Nobody told me, he says. I just put two and two together. Cocaine's everywhere, and these yuppie baby boomers Nelson's age are just the ones who use it. It takes money, lots of money, to maintain a real habit. Doesn't Prue keep complaining about all these bills they can't pay? Janice comes close to the bed and stands. He sees through her cotton nightie shadows of her nipples and her pubic hair. From his angle she looks strangely enormous, and in his diagonal position he undergoes one of those surges of lightheadedness as when he stands up too fast. It is not clear who is upright and who is not. Her body has kept the hard neatness it had when they were kids working at Kroll's, but underneath her chin there are ugly folds that ramify into her neck. She was determined not to get fat like her mother, but age catches you anyway. Janice says carefully, "Most young couples have bills they can't pay." He sits up to shake the lightness in his head, and because her body is there, puts his arm around her hips. On second thought, he reaches under her nightie and cups his hands around her solid, slightly gritty buttocks. He says, looking up past her breasts to her face, "The worst of it is, honey, I think he's been bleeding the company. I think he's been stealing, and Lyle has been helping him. That's why they let Mildred go." Her buttocks under his hands tense. He feels them squeeze together and become more spherical, with the tension of a basketball a few pounds under regulation pressure. A watery glimmer of arousal winks below his waist. Her blurred eyes look down upon him with somber concentration, the skin of her face sagging downward from the bone. He nuzzles one breast and closes his eyes again, smelling the faintly sweaty cotton, hiding from her intent downward eyes. Her voice asks, "What evidence do you have?" This irritates him. She is dumb. "That's what I was saying. I asked to look at the accounts and bank statements today, and they wouldn't let me unless you authorized it. All you have to do is call up this Lyle." He hears in her chest a curious stillness, and feels in her body a tension of restraint. Her nightie is transparent, but she is opaque. "If you did see these figures," she asks, "would you know enough to understand them?" He flicks her nipple with his tongue through the cotton. The glimmer below has grown to a steady glow, a swelling warmth. "Maybe not altogether," he says, "but even the monthly statements we got in Florida didn't look quite right to me. I'd take Mildred with me, and if she's too far gone— he said she's senile and over at Dengler's. I think we should hire somebody, a professional accountant in Brewer. You could call our lawyer for who he'd recommend. This may be something we have to bring the cops in on eventually." A nice April shower has started up outdoors, kindled by the slow sunset. Her body has stiffened and jerked back an inch. "Harry, your own son." "Well," he says, irritated again, "his own mother, stealing from his own mother." "We don't know anything for sure," Janice tells him. "It's only your theory. What else could Lyle have been hiding today? Now they'll have the wind up, so we should start moving or they'll shred everything like Ollie North." Now Janice is getting agitated, backing out of his arms and rubbing the back of one hand with the other, standing in the center of the carpet. He sees that the sex isn't going to happen. The first time in weeks he's really had the urge. "Damn that Nelson." She says, "I think I should talk to Nelson first." "You should? Why not we?" "According to Lyle, I'm the only one who counts." This hurts. "You're too soft on Nelson. He can do anything he wants with you." "Oh, Harry, it used to be so awful that time I ran off with Charlie. Nelson was only 12. He'd come over on his bicycle all the way into Eisenhower Avenue, and he'd stand there for an hour across the street looking up at our windows. And a couple of times I saw him and I hid. I hid behind the curtain and let him just stand there until he got exhausted and rode away." Staring over Harry's head, seeing her little boy across the street, so patient and puzzled and hopeful, her dark eyes fill with tears. Well, hell, Rabbit says, nobody asked him to go over there spying on you. I was taking care of him. With that poor crazy girl and perfectly hideous black man you were. It's just dumb luck the house didn't burn down with Nelson in it, too. I would have got him out. If I'd been there, I would have got them all out. You don't know, she says. You don't know what you would have done. And you don't know now what the real story is. It's all just your suspicions. Somebody's been poisoning your mind against Nelson. I bet it was Thelma. Thelma? We never see her any more. We ought to have the Harrisons over sometime. Pah! She spits this refusal. He has to admire her fury, the animal way it fluffs out her hair. Over my dead body? Just a thought. This is not a good topic. He reverts. I don't know what the real story is, but you do, huh? What has Nelson told you? She pinches her mouth shut, so she seems to have no lips at all, like Ma Springer used to look. Nothing really, she lies. Nothing really. Well, okay then. You know more than I do. Good luck. It's you he's ripping off. It's your father's company he and his queer buddies are taking down the tube. Nelson wouldn't steal from the company. Honey, you don't understand the power of drugs. Read the papers. Read People. Richard Pryor tells all. Just the other day they pulled Yogi Berra's kid in. People who are into coke will kill their grandmother for a fix. It used to be heroin was the bottom of the barrel, but crack makes heroin look mild. Nelson doesn't do crack. Much. Oh, who says? She almost tells him, but gets frightened. Nobody. I just know my own son, and from what Prue lets drop. Prue talks, does she? What does she say? She's miserable, and the children, too. Little Roy acts very odd, you must have noticed. Judy has nightmares. If it weren't for the children, Prue confessed to me, she would have left Nelson long ago. Harry feels evaded. Let's keep to the subject. Prue's got her problems, you've got yours. You better get your man-child out of Springer Motors fast. I'll talk to him, Harry. I don't want you to say a word. Why the fuck not? What's the fucking harm if I do? You'll come on too strong. You'll drive him deeper into himself. He takes you too seriously. But not you? He's sure of me. He knows I love him. And I don't? His eyes water at the thought. The shower outside has already lifted, leaving a trickle in the gutters. You do, Harry, but there's something else, too. You're another man. Men have this territorial thing. You think of the lot as yours. He thinks of it as his. It'll be his someday if he's not in jail. I was looking at him down in Florida, and there suddenly came into my mind the word criminal. Something about the shape of his head. I hate the way he's going bald. He'll look like Ronnie Harrison. Will you promise to let me talk to him and you do nothing? You'll just let him weasel out. But in fact he has no desire to confront Nelson himself. She knows this. She says, No, I won't, I promise. She stops rubbing the back of one hand with the fingers of the other and moves back toward him, flop, flop, as he sits on the bed. She rests her fingers above his ears and by the short hairs there pulls him softly toward her. I do like the way you want to defend me, she says. He yields to her insistent tug and rests his face on her chest again. Her nightie has a damp spot on it where he diddled her nipple with his tongue. Her nipples are chewed-looking, less perfect, realer than Thelma's. Being little, Janice's tits have kept their tilt pretty much, that perky upward thrust through those 40s Angora sweaters in the high school halls. Through the cotton, her body gives off a smell, a stirred-up, smoky smell. What's in it for me, he asks, his mouth against the wet cloth. Oh, a present, she says. When do I get it? Pretty soon. With the mouth? We'll see. She pushes his face back from her smoky, warm body, and with her fingers poking under his jaws makes him look up at her. But if you say another single word about Nelson, I'll stop, and you won't get any present. His face feels hot and his heart is racing, but in a steady, sweet way, contained in his rib cage the way his hard-on is contained in his pants, sweetly packed with blood. He is pleased that the Vasatech may make him light-headed, but leaves him enough blood pressure for one of these unscheduled once in a while. Okay, not a word, Rabbit promises, becoming efficient. I'll quick go to the bathroom and brush my teeth and stuff, and you turn off the lights, and somebody ought to take the phone off the hook, downstairs so we don't hear the squawking. Strange phone calls have been coming through. Grainy voices with that rich timbre peculiar to black males ask if Nelson Angstrom is there. Harry or Janice responds that Nelson does not live here, that this is the home of his parents. Well, I ain't had no luck at the number he give me for a home number, and at the place he works this here secretary always say the man is out. Would you like to leave a message? A pause. You just tell him Julius called. Or Luther. Julius? That's right. And what's it about, Julius, you want to say? He'll know what it's about. You just tell him Julius called. Or Perry. Or Dave. Or the caller would hang up without leaving a name. Or would have a thin, faintly foreign, precise way of speaking, and once wanted to speak not to Nelson, but with Harry. I am regretful to bother you, sir, but this son you have leaves me no recourse but to inform you in person. To inform me of what? To inform you that your son has incurred serious debts, and gentlemen to which I am associated, against any advice which I attempt to give them, talk of doing physical harm. Physical harm to Nelson? Or even to certain of his near and dear. This is sorry to say, and I do apologize, but these are not perhaps such gentlemen. I myself am merely the bearer of bad tidings. Do not put the blame on me. The voice seemed to be drawing closer to the telephone mouthpiece, closer to Harry's ear, growing plaintively earnest, attempting to strike a conspiracy to become Harry's friend and ally. The familiar room, the den with its frost-faced TV and two silvery pink wing chairs and bookshelves holding a smattering mostly of history books, and on the upper shelves some china knickknacks, fairies under toadstools, cherubic bald monks, baby robins in a nest of porcelain straws, that used to be in Ma Springer's break-front, all this respectable furnishing changes quality, becomes murky and fluid and useless, at the insertion of this menacing, plaintive voice into his ear, a voice with a heart of sorts, with an understandable human mission, an unpleasant duty to do, calling out of an extensive, slippery underground. Just so the balmy blue air above the Gulf of Mexico changed for him, as if a filter had been slipped over his eyes when the sunfish tipped over. Harry asks, treading water, "How did Nelson incur these debts?" The voice likes getting his own words back. "He incurred them, sir, in pursuit of his satisfactions, and that is within his privileges. But he or someone on his behalf must pay. My associates have been assured that you are a very excellent father." "Not so hot, actually. What'd you say your name was?" "I did not say, senor. I did not give myself a name. It is the name of Angstrom that is of concern. My associates are eager to settle with anyone of that excellent name." This man, it occurred to Harry, loves the English language as an instrument full of promise, of unexplored resources. "My son," Harry tells him, "is an adult, and his finances have nothing to do with me." "That is your word? Your very final word?" "It is. Listen, I live half the year in Florida and come back and—" But the caller has hung up, leaving Harry with the sensation that the walls of his solid little limestone house are as thin as diet crackers, that the wall-to-wall carpet under his feet is soaked with water, that a pipe has burst and there is no plumber to call. He turns to his old friend and associate, Charlie Stavros, retired from being Springer Motors' senior sales representative, and moved from his old place on Eisenhower Avenue to a new condominium development on the far east side of the city, where the railroad had sold off an old freight yard, 20 acres of it. It's amazing what the railroads owned in their heyday. He turns to his old friend and associate, Charlie Stavros, retired from being Springer Motors' senior sales representative, and moved from his old place on Eisenhower Avenue to a new condominium development on the far east side of the city, where the railroad had sold off an old freight yard, 20 acres of it. It's amazing what the railroads owned in their heyday. Harry isn't sure he can find the place, and suggests they have lunch at Johnny Fry's downtown. Johnny Fry's Chop House was the original name for this restaurant on Weiser Square, which became the Café Barcelona in the 70s, and then the Crepe House later in the decade, and now has changed hands again and calls itself Salad Binge, explaining in signs outside your local locale eatery and creative soups and organic fresh food health dishes, to attract the health-minded yuppies who work in the glass-skinned office building that has risen across from Kroll's, which still stands empty, its huge display windows whitewashed from the inside, and its bare windowless side toward the mountain exposed in rough mortared brick above the rubbly parking lot that extends up to the old Baghdad. Help. Salve me. The downtown is mostly parking space now, but the strange thing is that the space is all full. Though there is little to shop at downtown anymore, except for some discount drugstores and a McCrory's 5 and Dime that still peddles parakeet food and plastic barrettes to old people who haven't changed clothes since 1942, the number of trim youngish professionals in lightweight suits and tight linen skirts has ballooned. They work in the banks and insurance companies and state and federal agencies, and there is no end of them somehow. On a sunny day they fill the woodsy park the city planners, not local, a fancy architectural firm that came in and won the competition with their design and then flew back to Atlanta, have made out of Weiser Square, where the squeaking, sparking trolley cars used to line up for passengers. They bask, these young paper pushers, beside the abstract cement fountains, reading the Wall Street Journal with their coats off and neatly folded on the anodized, vandal-proof benches beside them. The women of this race especially fascinate Harry. They wear running shoes instead of high heels, but their legs are encased in sheer pantyhose, and their faces adorned by big round glasses that give them a comical, sexy look, as if their boobs are being echoed above in hard horn rims and coated plastic. They look like Goldie Hawns conditioned by Jane Fonda. The style these days gives them all wide mannish shoulders, and their hips have been pared and hardened by exercise bicycles and those ass-hugging pants that mold around every muscle like electric-colored paint. These women seem visitors from a slimmed-down future, where sex is just another exercise, and we all live in sealed cubicles and communicate through computers. You would have thought Charlie would be dead by now. But these Mediterranean types don't even seem to get gray and paunchy. They hit a plateau around 50 that doesn't change until they drop off of it suddenly somewhere in their 80s. They use their bodies up neatly, like mopping up a dinner plate with bread. Charlie had rheumatic fever as a kid, but though carrying a heart murmur inside him and subject to angina, he hasn't ever had an episode as severe as Harry's down in the Gulf. "How the fuck do you do it, Charlie?" Rabbit asks him. "You learn to avoid aggravation," Charlie tells him. "If anything looks to be aggravating, walk away from it. Things over at the lot had got to be aggravating, so I walked away. Christ, am I glad to be away from Toyotas. First thing I did was buy myself an old-fashioned American boat, an Olds Tornado. Soft shocks, single-finger steering, guzzles gas. I'm crazy about it. 5-liter V8 tomato red with a white padded half roof." "Sounds great. You park it close by?" "I tried and couldn't. Circled up around Spring Street twice and finally gave up and left it in a lot up past the old Baghdad and took a bus the 3 blocks down, so it costs a few pennies. Avoid aggravation, champ." "I still don't understand it. Downtown Brewer's supposed to be dead and there's nowhere to park. Where are all the cars coming from?" "They breed," Charlie explains. "They get pregnant as teenagers and go on welfare. They don't give a damn." One of the things Harry has always enjoyed about Charlie is the man's feel for the big picture. The two of them used to stand by the display window over at the lot on dull mornings and rehash the day's news. Rabbit has never gotten over the idea that the news is going to mean something to him. As they seat themselves at one of the tile-topped tables that remain from the days when this was the Café Barcelona, he says, "How about Schmidt last night?" Against the Pirates in Three River Stadium, the Phillies' veteran first baseman had doubled twice and surpassed Richie Ashburn's team record for total hits. "This is still spring," Charlie tells him. "Wait till the pitcher's arms warm up. Schmidt'll wilt. He's old, not compared to you and me, but in the game he's in he's old, and there's no hiding from the young pitchers over the long season." Harry finds it salutary to have his admiration for Schmidt checked. You can't live through these athletes. They don't know you exist. For them, only the other players exist. They go to the ballpark, and there's 30,000 there, and a big bumbly roar when their names are announced, and that's all of you they need. "Does it seem to you," he asks Charlie, "there's a lot of disasters lately? That Pan Am plane blowing up, and then those soccer fans in England the other day getting crushed, and now this gun exploding on the battleship for no apparent reason." "Apparent's the key word," Charlie says. "Everything has some little tiny reason, even when we can't see it. A little spark somewhere, a little crack in the metal. Also, champ, look at the odds. How many people in the world now? 5 billion? With the world jammed up like it is, the wonder is more of us aren't trampled every day or blown up or whatever. There's a crush on, and it's not going to get better. Rabbit's heart dips, thinking that from Nelson's point of view he himself is a big part of the crowding. That time he screamed outside the burning house at 26 Vista Crescent, "I'll kill you!" He didn't mean it. A spark, a crack in metal, a tiny flaw. When you die, you do the world a favor. Charlie is frowning down into the menu, which is enormous, printed in photocopy in green ink on rough, flecked, acid-free paper. The things they can do with Xerox now. Who still uses a place like Verity Press? First letterpress went, then photo offset. Charlie no longer wears thick, squarish horn rims that set a dark bar across his eyebrows, but gold aviator frames that hold his thick lavender-tinted lenses to his nose like fingers pinching a wineglass. Charlie used to be thick-set, but age has whittled him so his Greek bones show. The high-pinched arch to his nose, the slanting hollow temples below his dark hairline. His sideburns are gray, but he is shaving them shorter. Studying the menu, he chuckles. "Beefsteak salad," he reads. "Pork kebab salad. What kind of salads are those?" When the waitress comes, Charlie kids her about it. "What's with all this high-cal, high-fat meat?" he asks. "You giving us a beefsteak with a little lettuce on the side?" "The meat is shoelaced and worked in," the waitress says. She is tall and almost pretty, with her hair bleached and trained up in a fluffy mohawk, and a row of little earrings all around the edge of one ear, and dark, dusty, rosy spots rouged behind her eyes. Her tongue has some trouble in her mouth, and it's cute, the earnest, deliberate way her lips move. They found there was a call for these, you know, heartier ingredients. So underneath everything, Rabbit thinks, it's still Johnny Fry's Chop House. "Tell me about the macadamia and bacon salad," he says. "It's one of people's favorites," she says. "The bacon is crisp and in like flakes. Most of the fat has been pressed out of it. Also there's alfalfa sprouts and some radishes and cucumber sliced real thin, and a couple kinds of lettuce. I forget the different names, and I don't know what all else. Maybe some chuba. That's dried sardines." "Sounds good," Rabbit says, before it doesn't, and he has to choose again. Charlie points out, "Nuts and bacon aren't exactly what the doctor ordered." "You heard her. The fat's been squeezed out. Anyway, a little bit can't kill you. It's more a matter of internal balance. Come on, Charlie, loosen up." "What's in the seaweed special?" Charlie asks the waitress, because both men like to hear her talk. "Oh, hijiki, of course, and wakame, and dulse, and agar in with a lot of chickpeas and lentils, and leafy greens. It's wonderful if you're going macrobiotic seriously and don't mind that slightly bitter taste, you know, that seaweed tends to have." "You've done talked me out of it, Jennifer," Charlie says, reading her name stitched onto the bodice of the lime-green jumper they wear for a uniform at Salad Binge. "I'll take the spinach and crab." For salad dressing, we have Russian, Roquefort, Italian, creamy Italian, poppy seed, Thousand Island, oil and vinegar, and Japanese. "What's in the Japanese?" Harry asks, not just to see her lips curl and pucker around the little difficulty in her mouth, but because the Japanese interest him professionally. How do they and the Germans do it when America's going down the tubes? "Oh, I could ask in the kitchen if you really care, but umeboshi, I think, and tamari, of course. We don't use that commercial soy sauce. And sesame oil and rice vinegar." Her eyes harden as she senses that these men are flirtatiously wasting her time. Feeling apologetic, they both order creamy Italian and settle to each other. It has been a long time their rapport has grown rusty. Charlie does seem older, drier when you look. The thin gold aviator frames take out of his face a lot of that masculine certainty that must have appealed to Janice 20 years ago. "Cute kid," Charlie says, arranging the silver around his plate more neatly, square to the edges of the paper placemat. "Whatever happened to Melanie?" Rabbit asks him. 10 years ago they sat in this same restaurant, and Melanie, a friend of Nelson's and Prue's living at the time at Ma Springer's house, had been their waitress. Then she became Charlie's girlfriend, old as he was relatively. At least they went to Florida together. One of the things, maybe, that had made Florida seem attractive. But no bimbo there had offered herself to Harry. The only flickers he got were from women his own age who looked ancient. "She became a doctor," Charlie says, "a gastroenterologist, to be exact, in Portland, Oregon. That's where her father wound up, you'll recall." Just barely. He was a kind of late-blooming hippie, wasn't he? "He settled down with the third wife and has been a big support to Melanie. It was her mother, actually, who was flipping out back in Mill Valley. Alcohol, guys, drugs." The last word hurts Harry's stomach. "How come you know all this?" Charlie shrugs minimally, but cannot quite suppress his little smile of pride. We keep in touch. I was there for her when she needed a push. I told her, go for it. She still had a bit of that poor little me I'm only a girl thing. I gave her the boost she needed. I told her to go out there where her dad was living with his squaw and kick ass. Me, you tell, avoid aggravation. Her, you told to go for it. Different cases, different ages. You her age, I'd tell you go for it. I'll still tell you, as long as you avoid aggravation. Charlie, I have a problem. That's news? A couple of 'em, actually. For one, I ought to do something about my heart. I just can't keep drifting along waiting for my next MI. You're losing me, champ. You know, myocardial infarction, heart attack. I was lucky to get away with the one I did have. The docs tell me I ought to have an open heart, a multiple bypass. Go for it. Sure, easy for you to say. People die having those things. I notice you never had one. But I did, in '87, December. You were in Florida. They replaced 2 valves, aortic and mitral. When you have rheumatic fever as a kid, it's the valves that go. They don't close right. That's what gives you the heart murmur, blood running the wrong way. Rabbit can hardly bear these images, all these details inside him, valves and slippages and crusts on the pipe. What did they replace them with? Pig heart valves. The choice is that or a mechanical valve, a trap with a ball. With the mechanical, you click all the time. I didn't want to click if I could help it. They say it keeps you awake. Pig valves. Rabbit tries to hide his revulsion. Was it terrible? They split your chest open and ran your blood through a machine? Piece of cake. You're knocked out cold. What's wrong with running your blood through a machine? What else you think you are, champ? A God made one of a kind with an immortal soul breathed in. A vehicle of grace. A battlefield of good and evil. An apprentice angel. All those things they tried to teach you in Sunday school, or really didn't try very hard to teach you, just let them drift in out of the pamphlets back there in that church basement, buried deeper in his mind than an air raid shelter. You're just a soft machine, Charlie maintains, and lifts his squarish hands with their white cuffs and rectangular gold links to let Jennifer set his salad before him. He saw her coming with eyes in the back of his head. She circled the table gingerly. These men are doing something to her, she doesn't know what, and puts a bacon-flecked green mound bigger than a big breast in front of Harry. It looks rich and more than he should eat. The tall, awkward girl with her strange white rooster comb trembling in the air still hovers, the roundnesses in her green uniform pressing on Harry's awareness as he sits at the square-tiled table trying to frame his dilemmas. "Is there anything more I can get you, gentlemen?" Jennifer asks, her lips gently struggling to articulate. It's not a lisp she has, quite. It's like her tongue is too big. Something to drink? Charlie asks her for a Perrier with lime. She says that San Pellegrino is what they have. He says it's all the same to him. Fancy water is fancy water. Rabbit, after an internal struggle, asks what kinds of beer they have. Jennifer sighs, feeling they are putting her on, and recites, Schlitz, Miller, Miller Lite, Bud, Bud Light, Michelob, Lowenbrau, Corona, Coors, Coors Light, and Ballantine Ale on draft. All these names have an added magic from being tumbled a bit in her mouth. Not looking Charlie in the eye, Harry opts for a Mick. Jennifer nods unsmiling and goes away. If she doesn't want to excite men, she shouldn't wear all those earrings and go so heavy on the makeup. "Piece of cake, you were saying," he says to Charlie. "They freeze you. You don't know a thing." Guy I know down in Florida, not much older than we are, had an open heart, and he says it was hell. The recuperation took forever. And furthermore, he doesn't look so great even so. He swings a golf club like a cripple. Charlie does one of his tidy small shrugs. "You gotta have the basics to work with. Maybe the guy was too far gone. But you're in good shape. Could lose a few pounds, but you're young. What, 55? Wish I was. 56 last February. That's young. Would you believe I hit the big 60 last October? The way I'm going, I'll be happy to hit 60. I look at all these old crocks down in Florida, shriveled-up mummies, toddling right into their 90s in their shorts and orthopedic sneakers, perky as bejesus, and I want to ask 'em, what makes you so great? How did you do it? A day at a time, Charlie suggests. One day at a time, and don't look down. Harry can tell he's getting bored with issuing reassurances, but Charlie's all he's got now that he's unloaded Thelma. There's this other thing they can do now, an angioplasty. They cut open an artery in your groin. Hey, I'm eating. And poke it up all the way to your heart, would you believe? Then they pop out this balloon in the narrow place of the coronary artery and blow the damn thing up. Not with air, with salt water somehow. It cracks the plaque. It stretches the artery back to the way it was. With a lot of luck it does, Charlie says, and a year later you're back in the same boat, plugged up with macadamia nuts and beer yet. Beer has come on the end of Jennifer's lean arm in a frosted glass mug, golden and foam-topped and sizzling with its own excited bubbles. If I can't have a single beer now and then, I'd just as soon be dead, Harry lies. He sips, and with a bent forefinger wipes the foam from under his nose. That gesture of Nelson's. He wonders when she fucks how protective Jennifer has to be of that wobbly mohawk. Some punk girls, he's read, put safety pins through their nipples. Coronary bypass is what you want, Charlie is telling him. These balloons, they can only do one artery at a time. Bypass grafts, they can do 4, 5, 6 once they get in there. What do you care if they pull open your rib cage? You won't be there. You'll be way out of it, dreaming away. Actually, you don't dream. It's too deep for that. It's a big nothing, like being dead. I don't want it, Harry hears himself say sharply. He softens this too. Not yet, anyway. Charlie's word pull has upset him, made it too real. The physical exertion, pulling open these resistant bone gates so his spirit will fly out and men in pale green masks will fish in this soupy red puddle with their hooks and clamps and bright knives. Once on television, watching by mistake over Janice's shoulder one of these PBS programs on childbirth, they wouldn't put such raunchy stuff on the networks, he saw them start to cut open a woman's belly for a cesarean. The knife in the rubber-gloved hand made a straight line, and on either side yellow fat curled up and away like 2 strips of foam rubber. This woman's abdomen, with a baby inside, was lined in a material just like foam rubber. Down in Florida, he says, I had a catheterization. The word makes trouble in his mouth, as if he's become the waitress. And it wasn't so bad, more boring than anything else. You're wide awake, and then they put like this big bowl over your chest to see what's going on inside. Where the dye is being pumped through, it's hot. So hot you can hardly stand it. He feels he's disappointing Charlie, being so cowardly about bypasses, and to deepen his contact with the frowning, chewing other man, confides, "The worst thing of it, Charlie, is I feel half dead already. This waitress is the first girl I've wanted to fuck for months." "Boobs," Charlie says. "Great boobs, on a skinny body. That's sexy, like Bo Derek after her implant. Her hair is what gets me. Tall as she is, she adds 6 inches with that hairdo. Tall isn't bad. The tall ones don't get the play the cute little short ones do, and do more for you. Also, being skinny has its advantages. There's not all that fat to come between you and the clitoris. This may be more male bonding than Rabbit needs." He says, "But all those earrings, don't they look painful? And is it true some punk girls—" Charlie interrupts impatiently. "Pain is where it's at for punks. Mutilation, self-hatred, slam dancing. For these kids today, ugly is beautiful. That's their way of saying what a lousy world we're giving them. No more rainforests, toxic waste. You know the drill. When I came back this spring, I did a certain amount of driving around the city, all the sections. Some of these Hispanics were practically screwing on the street. Drugs, Charlie says. They don't know what they're doing half the time. Did you see in the Standard some spick truck driver from West Miami was caught over near Maiden Springs with, they estimate, $75 million worth of cocaine, 500 kilos packed in orange crates marked fragile? They can't stop dope, Charlie says, aligning his knife and fork on the edge of his empty plate, as long as people are willing to pay for it. The guy was a Cuban refugee, evidently, one of those we let in. These countries go communist, they let us have all their crooks and crackpots." Charlie's tone is level and authoritative, but Harry feels he's losing him. It's not quite like the old days when they had all day to kill over in the showroom. Charlie has finished his spinach and crab, and Rabbit has barely made a dent in his own heaping salad, he's so anxious to get advice. He gets a slippery forkful into his mouth and finds among the oily lettuce and alfalfa sprouts a whole macadamia nut, and delicately splits it with his teeth, so his tongue feels the texture of the fissure, miraculously smooth like a young woman's body, like a marble tabletop. When he swallows, he gets out, "That's the other thing preying on my mind. I think Nelson is into cocaine." Charlie nods and says, "So I hear." He picks up the fork he's just aligned and reaches over with it toward Harry's big breast of bacon-garnished greenery. "Let me help you out with all that, champ." "You've heard he's into cocaine?" Yeah, he's like his granddad, jumpy. He needs crutches. I never found the kid easy to deal with." "Me neither," Harry says eagerly, and it comes tumbling out. "I went over there last week to have it out with him about cocaine. I'd just got wind of it. And he was off somewhere, he usually is, but this accountant he's hired, a guy dying of AIDS, would you believe, was there, and when I asked to look at the books, just about gave me the up yours sign and said I had to get Janice's say-so. And she, the dumb mutt, doesn't want to give it. I think she's scared of what she'll find out. Her own kid robbing her blind. The used sales are down. The monthly stat sheets have been looking fishy to me for months. You'd know. Doesn't sound good, Charlie agrees, reaching again with his fork. A macadamia nut, each one nowadays costs about a quarter, escapes in Harry's direction, and only his quick reflexes prevent it from falling into his lap and staining with salad oil the russet slacks he took out of the cleaner's bag and put on for the first time today. The first spring day that's felt really warm. The sudden motion gives him a burning pang behind his rib cage. That evil child is still playing with matches in there. He tries to ignore the pain and goes on. And now we get these phone calls at funny hours, guys with funny voices asking for Nelson or even telling me they want money. They play rough, Charlie says. Dope is big business. He reaches once more. Hey, leave me something. How do you stay so skinny? So what shall I do? Maybe Janice should talk to Nelson. That's just what I told her. Well, then. But the bitch won't. At least she hasn't so far that I know of. This is good, Charlie says, this health stuff, but it's all like Chinese food. It doesn't fill you up. So what did you say your verdict was? Sometimes, between a husband and wife, all the history gets in the way. Want me to sound old Jan Jan out, see where she's coming from? Harry hesitates hardly at all before saying, Charlie, if you could, that would be super. Would you gentlemen like some dessert? Jennifer has materialized. Turning his head in surprise at the sound of her sweetly impeded voice, Harry sees, inches from his eyes, that Charlie, as usual, is right. Great boobs, gawky and self-hating as the rest of her is. Her parents must have put a lot of protein, a lot of Cheerios and vitamin-enriched bread into those boobs. In his fragile, freighted mood, they seem two more burdens on his brain. The stretched chest of her green jumper lifts as she takes in breath to say, Today our special is a cheesecake made from low-fat goat's milk topped with delicious creamed gooseberries. Rabbit, his eyebrows still raised by the waitress's breasts, looks over at Charlie. What do you think? Charlie shrugs unhelpfully. It's your funeral. The phone is ringing, like thrilling cold water poured into the mossy, warm crevices of his dream. He was dreaming of snuggling into something, of having found an aperture that just fit. The phone is on Janice's side. He gropes for it across her stubbornly sleeping body and, with a throat dry from mouth breathing, croaks, Hello? The bedside clock seems to have only one hand until he figures out it's 10 minutes after 2. He expects one of those men's voices and tells himself they should take the phone off the hook downstairs whenever they go to bed. His heart's pounding seems to fill the dark room to its corners, suffocatingly. A tremulous young woman's voice says, Harry, it's Prue. Forgive me for waking you up, but Shame, fear trip her voice into silence. She feels exposed. Yeah, go on, he urges softly. I'm desperate. Nelson has gone crazy. He's already hit me, and I'm afraid he'll start in on the children. Really? He says stupidly. Nelson wouldn't do that. But people do it. It's in the papers all the time. Who on earth is it? Janice asks irritably, yanked from her own dreams. Tell them you have no money. Just hang up. Prue is sobbing on the end of the line. Can't stand it any more. It's been such hell for years. Yeah, Harry says, still feeling stupid. Here's Janice, he says, and passes the hot potato into her fumbling hand out from under the covers. His sudden window into Prue, the hot, bright, unhappy heart of her, felt illicit. He switches on his bedside light as if that will help clear this all up. The white jacket of the history book he is still trying to get through, with its clipper ship in an oval of cloud and sea, leaps up shiny under the pleated lampshade. Since he began reading the book last Christmas afternoon, the author herself has died, putting a kind of blight on the book. Yet he feels it would be bad luck never to finish it. Yes, Janice is saying into the phone at wide intervals. Yes. Did he really? Yes. She says, We'll be right over. Stay away from him. What about going into Judy's room with her and locking yourselves in? Mother had a bolt put on the door. It must be still there. Still Prue's voice crackles on like an acid eating into the night's silence, the peace that had been in the room 10 minutes before. Bits of his interrupted dream come back to him. A visit to some anticipated place on a vehicle like a trolley car. Yes, it had been an old-time trolley car, the tight weave of cane seats. He had forgotten how they looked, the way they smelled, warmed by the sun, and the porcelain loops to hang from, the porcelain buttons to press, the dusty wire grates at the windows, the air and light coming in on old-fashioned straw hats, the women with paper flowers in theirs, all heading somewhere gay, an amusement park, a fair. Who was with him? There had been a companion, a date, on the seat beside him, but he can't come up with her face. The tunnel of love. The trolley car turned into something carrying them, him, into a cozy tunnel of love. It fit. Could the neighbors help? More crackling, more sobbing. Rabbit gives Janice the cut signal you see on TV, the finger across the throat, and gets out of bed. The aroma of his old body lifts toward him as he rests his bare feet on the carpet, a stale, meaty, cheesy scent. Their bedroom in the limestone house has pale beige Antron broadloom. A house full of unpatterned wall-to-wall seemed snug and modern to him when they ordered it all, but in their 10 years of living here certain spots, inside the front door, the hall outside the door down to the cellar, the bedroom on either side of the bed, have collected dirt from shoes and sweat from feet, and turned a gray no rug shampoo could remove, a grimy big fingerprint your life has left. Patterned carpets like people had when he was a boy, angular flowers and vines and mazes he would follow with his eyes until he felt lost in a jungle, swallowed the dirt somehow, and then the housewives up and down Jackson Road would beat it out of them this time of year, on their backyard clotheslines, making little swirling clouds in the cool April air, disappearing into the dust of the world. He collects clean underwear and socks from the bureau, and then is a bit stumped what to wear to an assault. Harry's brain is skidding along like a surfer on the pumping of his heart. "Hi, honey," Janice is saying in another tone, high-pitched and grandmotherly. "Don't be scared. We all love you. Your daddy loves you. Yes, he does, very much. Grandpa and I are coming right over. You must let us get dressed now so we can do that. It'll take just 20 minutes, honey. We'll hurry, yes. You be good till then and do whatever your mother says." She hangs up and stares at Harry from beneath her skimpy rumpled bangs. "My God," she says, "he punched Prue in the face and smashed up everything in the bathroom when he couldn't find some cocaine he thought he hid in there that he wanted." He wants, Harry says. "He told her we're all stealing from him." "Ha," Harry says, meaning it's the reverse. Janice says, "How can you laugh when it's your own son?" Who is this woman, this little nut-hard woman, to chasten him? Yet he feels chastened. He doesn't answer, but instead says in a measured, mature manner, "Well, it's probably good this is coming to a head if we all survive it. It gets it out in the open, at least." She puts on what she never wears in the daylight up north, her salmon running suit with the powder blue sleeves and stripe. He opts for a pair of pressed chinos fresh from the drawer, and the khaki shirt he puts on to do light yard chores, and his oldest jacket, a green wide-wale corduroy with leather buttons. Kind of a casual Saturday afternoon look. Retirement has made them both more clothes-conscious than before. In Florida, the retirees play dress-up every day, as if they've become their own paper dolls. They take the slate-gray Celica, the more Batmobile-like and steely car, on this desperate mission in the dead of the night. Along the stilled, curving streets of Penn Park, the oaks are just budding, but the maples are filling in, no longer red in tint, but dense with translucent, tender new leaves. The houses have an upstairs nightlight on here and there, or a back porch light to keep cats and raccoons away from the garbage. But only the street lamps compete with the moon. The trimmed large bushes of the groomed yards, the yews and arbor vitae and rhododendrons look alert by night, like jungle creatures come to the water-hole to drink and caught in a camera's flash. It seems strange to think that while we sleep, these bushes are awake, exhaling oxygen, growing. They do not sleep. Stars do not sleep, but above the housetops and tree crowns shine in a cold, arching, dusty sprinkle. Why do we sleep? What do we rejoin? His dream, the way it fit him all around. At certain angles the lit asphalt feels in the corners of his eyes like snow. Penn Park becomes West Brewer, and a car or two is still awake and moving on blanched, deserted Penn Boulevard, an extension of Weiser with a supermarket parking lot on one side and on the other a low brick row of shops from the 30s. little narrow stores selling buttons and bridal gowns and pastry and Zip chocolates and Sony TVs and hobby kits to make model airplanes with. They still manufacture and sell those in this era when all the kids are supposedly couch potatoes and all the planes are these wallowing, wide-bodied jets with black noses like panda bears, not sleek killing machines like Zeros, Messerschmitts, Spitfires, Mustangs. Funny to think that with all that World War effort, manufacturers still had the okay to make those little models, keeping up morale in the kiddie set. All the shops are asleep. A flower shop shows a violet growing light, and a pet store a dimly lit aquarium. The cars parked along the curbs display a range of unearthly colors, no longer red and blue and cream, but cindery lunar shades, like nothing you can see or even imagine by daylight. Harry pops a nitroglycerin pill and tells Janice accusingly, "The doctors say I should avoid aggravation." "It wasn't me who woke us up at 2 a.m, it was your daughter-in-law." "Yeah, because your precious son was beating up on her." "According to her," Janice states, "we haven't heard Nelson's side of it." The underside of his tongue burns. "What makes you think he has a side? What are you saying? You think she's lying? Why would she lie? Why would she call us up at 2 a.m. to lie?" "She has her agenda, as people say. He was a good bet for her when she got herself pregnant, but now that he's in a little trouble, he's not such a good bet, and if she's going to get herself another man, she better move fast, because her looks won't last forever." He laughs in applause. "You've got it all figured out." Discreetly, distantly, his asshole tingles from the pill. "She is good-looking, isn't she? Still, to some men she would seem so, the kind that don't mind big, tough women. What I never liked about her, though, was she makes Nelson look short." "He is short," Harry says. "Beats me why. My parents were both tall. My whole family's always been tall." Janice considers in silence her responsibility for Nelson's shortness. There are any number of ways to get to Mount Judge through Brewer, but tonight, the streets all but deserted and the stoplights blinking yellow, he opts for the most direct, going straight over the Running Horse Bridge that once he and Jill walked over in moonlight, though not so late at night as this, straight up Weiser, past the corner building that used to house Jimbo's Friendly Lounge until trouble with the police finally closed it, and that now has been painted pastel condo colors and remodeled into a set of offices for yuppie lawyers and financial advisers, past Schoenbaum Funeral Directors with its stately buildings of white brick on the left, and the shoeshine parlor that sells New York papers and hot-roasted peanuts, the best peanuts in town, still selling them all those years since he was a kid not much older than Judy now. His idea then of the big time was to take the trolley around the mountain and come into downtown Brewer on a Saturday morning and buy a dime bag of peanuts still warm from the roaster, and walk all around, cracking them and letting the shells fall where they would, at his feet on the sidewalks of Weiser Square. Once an old bum grumbled at him for littering. Even the bums had a civic conscience then. Now the old downtown is ghostly, hollow in lunar colors and closed to traffic at 5th Street, where the little forest planted by the city planners from Atlanta to make a pedestrian mall looms with ghostly branches under the intense blue lights installed to discourage muggings and sex and drug transactions beneath these trees, which grow taller every year and make the downtown gloomier. Rabbit turns left on 5th, past the post office and the Ramada Inn that used to be the Ben Franklin with its grand ballroom, which always makes him think of Mary Ann and her crinolines and the fragrance between her legs, and over to Eisenhower Avenue above number 1204, where Janice hid out with Charlie that time, and takes an obtuse angled turn right, heading up through the Hispanic section, which used to be German working class, across winter, spring, and summer streets with the blinding lights and occasional moving shadow. Spicks out looking for some kind of a deal. The nights still a little cool to bring out all the street trash. To Locust Boulevard and the front of Brewer High School, a Latin-inscribed Depression monument, ambitious for the common good like something communists would put up, the whole country close to communism in the 30s, people not so selfish then, put up the year Harry was born, 1933, and going to outlast him, it looks like. Of pale yellow brick and granite coins, it clings to the greening mountainside like a locust husk. "What do you think she meant?" he asks Janice, gone crazy. "How crazy can you go from cocaine?" "Doris Kaufman, Eberhardt, has a brother-in-law whose stepson by his wife's first marriage had to go to a detox center out near the middle of the state. He got to be paranoid and thought Hitler was still alive and had agents everywhere to get just him. He was Jewish. Did he beat up his wife and children? He didn't have a wife, I think. We don't know for sure Nelson threatened the children. Prue said he did. Prue was very upset. It's the money, I think, upsets her more than anything. It doesn't upset you? Not as much as it seems to you and Prue. Money isn't something I worry about, Harry. Daddy always said if I don't have 2 nickels to rub together, I'll rub 2 pennies. He had faith he could always make enough, and he did, and I guess I inherited his philosophy. Is that the reason you keep letting Nelson get away with murder? Janice sighs and sounds more than ever like her mother, Bessie Kerner Springer, who lived her whole life overweight, without a lick of exercise except housework, sitting in her big house with its shades down to protect the curtains and upholstery from sunlight, and sighing about the pains in her legs. Harry, what can I do, seriously? It's not as if he's still a child. He's 32. You could fire him from the lot, for starters. Yes, and shall I fire him as my son, too? Tell him I'm sorry, but he hasn't worked out? He's my father's grandson, don't forget. Daddy built that lot up out of nothing, and he would have wanted Nelson to run it even if he runs it into the ground. Really? Such a ruinous vision startles him. Having money makes people reckless. Bet $1 million. Junk bonds. Couldn't you fire him provisionally until he shapes up? Janice's tone has the bite of impatience, of fatigue. All this is so easy for you to say. You're just sore since Lyle told you I was the real boss. You're trying to make me suffer for it. You do it. You do whatever you think should be done at the lot, and tell them I said you should. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of you and Nelson fighting your old wars through me. Street lights flicker more swiftly on his hands as the Celica moves more rapidly through the city park, above the tennis courts and the World War II tank painted a thick green to forestall rust. Repainted so often they've lost the exact military green Harry remembers. What did they call it? Olive drab. He feels under the barrage of streetlights bombarded, and Brewer seems empty of life like those bombed-out German cities after the war. They wouldn't believe me, he tells her spitefully. They'd still come to you. And I'm like you, he tells her more gently, scared of what I'll stir up. After the park there is a stoplight that says red, and a locally famous old turreted house roofed in round fish-scale slate shingles, and then a shopping mall where the Cineplex sign advertises, "See you, Dream Team, say anything out of control." Then they're on 422 and a territory bred into their bones, streets they crossed and recrossed in all seasons as children, Central, Jackson, Joseph, the hydrants and mailboxes of the borough of Mount Judge like buttons fastening down their lives, their real lives, everything drained of color at this nadir of the night, the streets under the burning blue sodium looking rounded like bread loaves and crusted with snow, the brick-pillared porches treacherous emplacements up behind their little flat laps of lawn and tulip bed. Number 89 Joseph, the Springer's big stucco house, where when Rabbit was courting Janice he used to hate to come because it made his own family's semi-detached house on Jackson Road look poor, has all its lights ablaze, like a ship going down amid the silent, darkened treetops and roof peaks of the town. The huge, spreading copper beech tree on the left side, where Harry and Janice's bedroom used to be, a tree so dense the sun never shone in, and its beech nuts popping kept Harry awake all fall, is gone, leaving that side bare, its windows exposed and on fire. Nelson had it cut down. "Dad, it was eating up the whole house. You couldn't keep paint on the woodwork on that side, it was so damp. The lawn wouldn't even grow." Harry couldn't argue, and couldn't say that the sound of the rain in that great beech had been the most religious experience of his life, that and hitting a pure golf shot. They park outside under the maples that are shedding chartreuse fuzz and sticky stuff this time of year. He always hates that about parking here. He'll get the car washed Monday. Prue has been watching for their arrival. She pulls the door open as their feet hit the porch, as if there's an electric eye, like Thelma the other week. Judy is with her in some fuzzy Oshkosh-Bagosh pajamas that are too small for her. The child's feet look surprisingly long and white and bony, with the inches of exposed ankle. "Where's Roy?" Harry asks instantly. "Nelson's putting him in bed," Prue says, with a wry downward tug of one side of her mouth, a kind of apology. "To bed," Harry says. "You trust him with the kid?" She says, "Oh, yes, he's calmed down since I called. I think he shocked himself hitting me so hard. It did him good." In the illumination of the front hall they can see the pink welt along one cheekbone, the lopsided puffiness of her upper lip, the redness around her eyes as if rubbed and rubbed with a scouring pad. She is wearing that quilted shorty morning glory bathrobe, but not as in Florida over bare legs. Under it she has on a long blue nightgown. But you can see the outline of her legs through the thin cloth, like fish moving through murky water. Fake fur-lined bedroom slippers clothe her feet, so he can't check out her toenail polish. "Hey, is this some kind of false alarm?" Harry asks. "When you see Nelson, I don't think you'll think so," Prue tells him, and turns to the other woman. "Janice, I've had it. I want out. I've kept the lid on as long as I can, and now I've had it." And the eyes that have scoured the lids with tears begin to water again, and she embraces the older woman before Janice is quite straightened out from bending down to kiss and hug Judy hello. Harry's guts give a tug. He can feel Prue's attempt to make a sweeping connection. He can feel his wife's resistance. Prue was raised a Catholic, showy, given to big gestures, and Janice a tight little Protestant. Judy takes Harry's fingertips. When he stoops to peck her on the cheek, her hair gets in his eye. The little girl giggles and says in his ear, "Daddy thinks ants are crawling all over him." "He's always feeling itchy," Prue says, sensing that her attempt to sweep Janice into her escape plan has failed. She must do some more selling of the situation. "That's the coke. They call it formication. His neurotransmitters are fucked up. Ask me anything. I know it all. I've been going to Narconon and Brewer for a year now." "Huh?" Rabbit says, not quite liking her tough tone. "And what else do they tell you?" She looks straight at him, her green eyes glaring with tears and shock, and manages that smile of hers, down twisted at the corner. Her upper lip being puffy gives it a sad strangeness tonight. "They tell you it's not your problem. The addicts can only do it themselves, but that still leaves it your problem." "What happened here tonight, exactly?" he asks. He has to keep speaking up. He feels Janice pulling back, distancing herself irritatingly, like that time they took the kids to Jungle Gardens in the Camry. Judy doesn't find her grandparents as much fun as usual, and leaves Harry's side to go lean against her mother, pressing her carrot-colored head back against Prue's belly. Prue protectively encircles the child's throat with a downy, freckled forearm. Now 2 pairs of greenish eyes stare, as if Harry and Janice are not the rescue squad, but hostile invaders. Prue's voice sounds tough and weary. "The usual sort of garbage. He came home after 1 and I asked him where he'd been, and he told me none of my business.